I'm joined here by Louisa Campbell. How are you, Louise?
I am fabulous. Thank you. Yes, very
Brilliant.
happy.
I'm glad. How are you feeling after the publication of your latest book?
Oh, well, yes, gosh. Well, it's very uppy downy. I say that because I can't bear to say it's a roller coaster because it's such a cliche, but I can't think of a better one. So there's the tremendous excitement of finding out that your book's going to be published, which is just overwhelming, really, and you can't quite believe it. And it's something you've dreamed of, and it's wonderful. And then you start to worry, will it be all right? Will people like it? Um, and then the book comes out and people start buying it. And then you worry, oh my God, what are they going to say? Are they going to like it? And it's been wonderful, actually. I've had loads of messages from people on Messenger, probably because of the personal nature of a lot of the poems. And they're saying this particular poem really meant something to me, or that particular poem really stuck with me. I've been thinking about that all day. And I've had a couple of reviews, of course, which is just brilliant to think that people like yourself are generous enough and interested enough in the book to spend their own time and effort writing about it. So that's wonderful. Mm.
I've been following your work since Roundabout Nights, so I've been into it for a while, and I love the way you perform as well as read. I think you're both a performer and a reader, and on the page as well.
Thank you. One of the reviews said the book is a performance, and thinking about it, everybody in the book, I think of it as a book full of people. They're real people,
Yeah.
and they're either me or they're people that I've worked with, or they're a kind of hybrid of something I felt that somebody else has felt as well. So that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Um, so yes, I feel it's not a poem to read, it's somebody's voice to speak.
What does writing later in life mean to you? What effect has it had? Because Rosemary McLeish, who is just an incredible poet, she had a massive influence on me. I think she started writing when she was about 50. Yeah, so what effect do you think that had?
Oh, what a good question. Oh, I want to start right at the beginning. Everybody starts yawning. I'll be quick. The point at the beginning is that I wrote poems because I wanted to when I was 17, 18, and I showed them to my A-level English teacher. And he said, these are excellent, you can get them published. And I thought, oh, what a load of rubbish. That can't be true. I'm rubbish at everything. I'm no good at anything because that's what I've been told as a child. So I just didn't believe him. I thought he was humoring me or something and forgot all about it. And then 53 take 18, whatever that is, years later, I couldn't work. I'd had to give up nursing because of my autoimmune condition. And at that time, I was really very physically unwell and had to think of something to do that I could do in bed. And I also had a terrible, terrible memory, which is still, to be fair, quite rubbish. So I thought, well, writing, I can have a go at writing. I can sit in bed, propped up on pillows with a hardback notebook, and I can write. And if I can't remember what I've written, it doesn't matter because I can go back a few lines and read. So I started this Open University creative writing course. And I got a tuition fee loan, and off I went. And I kept getting A for everything. I couldn't believe it. It was incredible. And then it came to the dreaded poetry module. I can't do that. Oh my God, I'm going to make such a fool of myself. This is going to be awful. And of course, I had John McCulloch for my tutor.
Oh, he's
And he,
amazing.
oh my God, I love this man so much. I call him my poetry dad. So he manages to correct where you're going wrong in the most encouraging way possible, so that you get a manuscript covered in red pen, but in a good way. It's like, this is great. Can you do a bit more of that there? And just tuck those words over there. And then those brilliant words will look even more brilliant. And you know, and he was very good at, oh, you like that sort of thing. You'll like this, and finding poets to read. And of course, reading poetry is how you get good at writing poetry. So the thing is, the first poems I wrote got published. And
that's when you know you're
wrote,
good. That's
well,
when you know you're really
second
good.
poem I wrote was commended in the Bridport. And I didn't know. I thought, oh, everybody gets commended in the Bridport, but apparently they don't. And the thing is, it was full of 50 years worth of emotion. So there was power there. And that's why they were good, because I had something to say. So I think coming to writing later has meant that my writing has been, is this over the top saying my writing is powerful? No, it is. It's powerful.
It is powerful.
It's the poem that was commended was about my first husband and him dying of alcoholism. It written in a kind of quirky way. It was called My Dog, and it was called I know it's ridiculous to think your dead husband is living inside your dog, but he is. And it was this feeling I got when my dog looked at me with these big brown eyes, that it could have been the spirit of my husband looking at me. And people like that stuff. They like the depth and the interest and the quirkiness. So I was on to a winner, partly because, okay, I must have some sort of talent, I suppose, because people keep saying that, and it's stupid to sit here and say, oh no, I can't do it, because obviously I have a certain amount of skill. But the more important thing is I've got something to say, and people are interested, and that was wonderful. After years of thinking I was hopeless at everything, people were interested in what I'd written, and how wonderful it is to have a voice. So one of the things I've really enjoyed doing is getting people who think they can't write poetry to write poems. I tend to sit people down and force them to sometimes, poor things. And yeah, people have always got something to say when they haven't written for a long time. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I suppose that explains why sometimes you need to take a break if you've overwritten. Sometimes I find, you know, oh, I'm writing a lot and I'm writing the same stuff, and now it's going downhill and it's rubbish and it's stagnant. Let me just take a break and do something else in life.
Yes, absolutely, exactly that. And I think when you run out of things to say, or when I run out of things to say, I stop, and then I worry and think, I'll never ever write again. Oh my God, that's it. I never write anything again. That was my book. That's the end of my poetry life. I'll never do it again. And then suddenly, usually at a really inconvenient moment, like when you're in the shower or something comes to me and I think, oh, I've got to write that down. And then I realized that actually I've been thinking about that for the last 3 or 4 weeks, but I didn't know I was thinking about it. Does that happen to you?
Yes, very much so. But it's like I was saying the last time I did this to the last person I was talking to. So much of the process is unconscious that it's almost frightening to think, what is this stuff going on in my brain, you know, that I'm not even aware of?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But having worked as a psychodynamic therapist, do you want me to explain what that is?
Please, yeah.
So psychodynamics comes from Freud. And Freud said all sorts of controversial things. And I'm not thinking penis envy here. I'm thinking about the dynamic subconscious. So something that's dynamic is something that moves or has energy, or like the word dynamo. So the theory is that your subconscious is what actually motivates you. So the kick the cat theory, which is you've had a horrible, horrible day at work and you come home and the cat's in the way and you kick it out the way. Sorry, we wouldn't do that, but it's called the kick the cat. I have never kicked a cat. I would never kick a cat. Anyway, yeah. So you're furious and miserable and had a horrible day at work and you come home and you kick the cat. And you're not angry with the cat. Your subconscious is angry and chooses the cat to kick. So your subconscious motivates you to do all sorts of things, and you don't realize your subconscious is motivating you to do them. I mean, there are lots. You might constantly forget to reply to an email, and you think, why do I keep forgetting to do that? And then you suddenly realize, actually, you don't want to talk to that person, and your subconscious has taken over and stopped you doing it. So yes, my best example, I think, of the subconscious mind in my poetry is one that just fell out onto the page and got it won a local it was the Southeast Royal College of Psychiatrists poetry competition, and it won that. And what shall I read it to you? Because I'm
Please
going
do.
to read it
Yeah,
to
please
you,
do. Yeah.
and then I'll tell you afterwards. It's not very long. Most of my poems are short, so anybody listening, don't worry. Sorry. You see, that's saying more about me than them, isn't it? Sometimes when people say, I have a 25-page poem about my experiences in Kenya or something, and you think, time to put the kettle on. This is short. Okay, it's called Finding Nico, and it's on page 63. And what is incredible about this is that when I wrote it, I didn't know I had bipolar, which is ludicrous. But here we go. It fell onto the page. I didn't know what I was writing about. Finding Nico. Was it her dancing on top of 100-foot pole, calling the world to come up? Was it her high that married the stranger? Was it her low that divorced him? Each year she signs up to save the world. Each year she drops out, feeling the air pressing down like an anvil. She cries. She laughs. She says, my life is a party that nobody comes to. Often she feels like screaming. Sometimes she does. It sounds like a fountain of glass. She sees herself in the pieces, the same way lost treasures are found while searching for something else.
That's beautiful. I knew which poem you meant when you said when you described it, because I'd read it a few times. So, yeah.
How I went all tingly then when you said you've read it a few times. I thought, my God, somebody's read my poem more than once.
Yeah,
It's
of course.
wonderful. It's a privilege to be heard. It is.
It really is, actually. What's the relationship between poetry and mental health for you?
Oh God, they're so intertwined. The relationship between poetry and mental health. Well, I write almost exclusively about mental health and madness. And I do that for a variety of reasons. One, in a very self-indulgent way, to express myself and to be heard, as I've said. But another thing is, I really want people to get this thing that mad people are not other, are not weird, are not different. There are reasons for people's behavior. And what psychosis is all about is unlocking the reason for that weird behavior. And once you understand the behavior, then you think, oh, that's why so-and-so is doing that. I worked with a patient once who she was very, very high risk, bless her. She'd had her children taken away because she was bathing them in bleach. Not neat bleach, but she was putting bleach in the bath. And she had a hallucination, which was a woman with long, scratchy fingernails telling her she was dirty and that she must clean herself and that she must wash her children in bleach, wash herself in bleach. And talking through her life, she talked about how she was, I'm going to say something about child abuse. It's not particularly graphic, it's very sad, so make a cup of tea now. But it's not graphic detail specifically. But she was in a foster home, And there was a woman in the foster home who used to make her wear her urine-soaked nightie as a punishment if she'd wet the bed. And when she washed the children's hair, this woman had very long nails and she used to scratch their heads. And I said to her, so your hallucination, long scratchy fingernails telling you you're dirty, does this sound familiar? And she didn't get it, and she didn't get it. You know, it was so frightening for her, that experience, that she couldn't make the connection. But of course, as soon as she did make the connection, her behavior made complete sense, and she was living out the trauma that she'd experienced as a child. So this is why I like to tell my stories in the book. You know, the story of boy who ends up being an alcoholic because the only love he experiences is from alcohol. Another real person. And this is what I want people to understand, that madness is part of all of us. We've all got little mad things that if people came across them without understanding us or knowing us, I think, ooh.
I hate this idea of weirdness, and it's something I come up against, and I just try and challenge it when I come up against it in normal life, because it's just this passing comment of, oh, what a weirdo, and it's so innocent, and yeah, maybe it is innocent, but it just it bothers me, because it's kicking down, and if you want to,
Yeah.
you're annoyed, or you want to change the world, or you want to take your anger out on someone, go and get upset about Boris Johnson, go and do something, go and
Yeah.
make positive change, or if you
Yeah.
need attention, go and get a creative outlet. Do not kick down. And it just, it bothers me, because it's like you're creating further problems, you're creating mental health issues in that individual, and it is an opinion at the end of the day. They're weird to you, you're weird to someone, so that weirdness stuff really bothers me.
Yeah. I'm actually really pleased. I have a teenage son, and when I say I'm really pleased, his generation is almost obsessed with mental health, and they talk about mental health all the time. And sometimes I say, maybe you're just in a bit of a bad mood, maybe you're not having a depressive episode, and this kind of thing. And they're young, and they'll learn a bit more. But isn't it good that it's
Fantastic.
trendy to
Fantastic.
talk about mental health now? Hopefully that's going to help. Hopefully that's going to help a lot.
And I find it's more common to say, if someone's bullying you, it seems to be easier to say, to put the responsibility back on them and the focus back on them, and say,
Yes.
excuse me, you are abusive, and that will immediately shatter that situation, whereas before you could never do that.
Yeah, things aren't all getting worse.
Yeah. Can you say a bit more about Beautiful Nowhere? Where did it come from? How did you put it together? Everything like that.
This will be interesting for the writers, I think, people who are looking for publication, because the way Beautiful Nowhere was put together was that I wrote what I thought was a wonderful manuscript, and I sent it out to a few publishers, and I got some lovely responses like, oh, I would publish it, but I'm booked up for 2 years, or this is great, it's going to be published soon, but not by me, so sort of congratulations, but no cigar. And then I sent it to Boat Whistle, and the lovely editor Hamish wrote back and said, I really liked 6 of the poems. So I thought, well, okay, there were about 55 poems and he liked 6, so he's not going to publish me. And I wrote back, he said, well, thanks so much for reading it, and I'm grateful for your time and your interest. And he said, no, you misunderstand me. I really like 6 poems. And what I want you to do is send me everything you think I might like. What other poems have you got? Send me everything. So I did. I went through everything I'd ever written, chose what I thought was the best, sent them all to him. What we did was we color coded them. So green were ones he absolutely loved. Amber were ones he quite liked. And red were, well, he wasn't really bothered. So we ended up with all the green ones, with some amber ones that I argued for. And I don't think, did we end up, I think we've got a couple of red ones that I said, no, we've got to have that. One of them was the exorcism poem, Deliver Us, because first I love performing it because it's my opportunity to have an audience member come up. You know what I'm like, I love to get the audience involved. So for that one, I can get an audience member come and read the demon if they want, or they can read me and I'll read the demon. And also because it's quite dramatic to be able to say, well, there's a possession poem in here and an exorcism poem. So I argued for those and was able to keep them. But then I had, what is it, about 46 poems. And it was a question of, well, how do these make a coherent collection? How does this work? And I tried a spreadsheet. So this one's about this, that one's about that, tick boxes. That didn't work. It just seemed to be lots of connected events. And then I thought, well, actually, they're all real. They're all true. They've all happened. They're all autobiographical or somebody else's life. So they're all life writing poems. And I arranged them in order of how they'd actually happened. And suddenly there was the story. You know, there'd been me and other people with awful childhoods. We'd chosen to work in nursing or caring professions to help work out our own distress. It had all been too much and we'd gone mad, and then we'd recovered. And there was my life in poems. So I would say to anybody sending out collections, you may think you've got the most wonderful collection going, and it may be that actually you've got some better poems and you don't realize, and you could rejig it all and chuck some out and bring some back. If there's ever a poem that you're not 100% sure with, I would chuck it out and stick with all the ones you're proud of. And of course, what's happening now is that people, when they report back to me, are all picking different poems. So if they were all saying, oh, I really loved Finding Nico, if everybody said I loved Finding Nico, I'd think, oh God, the rest must be a bit shit. But because I've got Hamish's opinion and mine together, I have real confidence in that book. But it was nerve-wracking, but it's, as I said, it's me, the confidence in the book. And I'm really proud of my little book. Yeah.
You should be. You should be. It's wonderful.
When I say little, it is physically little. I'm not being patronizing. Hamish likes little books that you can put in your pocket. So there you are.
And where did the cover come from, by the way, the idea for the cover?
The cover is by Kazvina, who she won't mind me at all saying she's quite as bonkers as I am. We got chatting because we discovered we both suffered quite badly from dissociation. And I went to visit her in her trailer, as she calls it. And we had a hysterical conversation, which was like 6 people talking at once. And I don't mean because we wouldn't stop talking. I mean, because we were talking from different aspects of ourselves and making each other laugh because we knew what was happening. So it was a bit like me and my demon and Karen and 3 different lives she'd lived, all trying to have a conversation and giggling. Anyway, wonderful Karen. So we bonded, and her artwork is spectacular. And when it was time to look for a cover, I really wanted a cover by someone with mental health problems. And the obvious person to go to was Kaz. And this particular one, because it's got birds and mice in this sort of gilded maze, it went with one of the possible titles that we had. Hamish and I had come up with a list of titles and argued. In fact, that was the only thing we really argued over. And he had to phone me because we were getting really stroppy with each other. And then I realized that if we used this image of the gilded maze, that the title I wanted, Beautiful Nowhere, worked perfectly with it because it's beautiful, because it's gilded and it's pink and it's pretty, and it's nowhere because they're all going round and round in circles and not getting anywhere. So, but it's fun. And my son said to me, "You realise what that's a picture of, Mum? You know what it is. You know that's a woman's private parts." And I said, "Don't be ridiculous, what you're talking about." But actually, he's right. And some people think, yes, it it looks like a woman's undercarriage. I don't know how much detail I can say on this podcast, but it also looks like, somebody else said it reminds her of a ball gown, you know, cinched at the middle, and
Yes,
somebody
that's
else
what I
said it's
thought,
a
like
bow.
a corset or
Yes,
something.
yes. And somebody said a sanitary towel. And so we've had all these different ideas of what it is, which is great fun. So it shows it's an interesting image at least. And I seriously mean this when I say I'm going to get it together to do a sort of Rorschach's ink blot test on social media and get people to vote for which is which, and see if we can find out what sort of people they are by what they think it is.
I suppose they're all linked themes, though, aren't they?
They
Female,
are.
you
Yeah.
know, female themes.
Mm.
What would you say to someone right now really struggling mentally and finding it hard to find the light?
I would say there is a beautiful nowhere. And by that, I mean, beauty seems to be nowhere. Getting better, being mentally healthy feels like a place you can never be, you can never get to, you can't envisage it, you can't picture it. But it is there. And it will probably find you before you find it. If we're talking depression, a really nasty bout of clinical depression tends to last, sorry to give us statistics, it can be unhelpful if yours is
It's actually quite
lasting
comforting. Well,
longer.
comforting to me anyway, yeah.
Okay, so a really nasty bout of clinical depression tends to last approximately 6 months, after which you start being able to see good things. So when you're depressed, you cannot see good things. You can only see bad things. I would say what I tend to put when I sign my book, which is, may you always be able to find your beautiful nowhere. If we're talking depression and low mood, it's a case of not being able to see beauty, not being able to see goodness, and all you can see is the badness in the world. But that goodness does come back to you. I mean, from the point of view of a classic clinical depression episode, the worst bit can last approximately, or in an not so much, yeah, approximate, at an average period of time, 6 months, after which you might find you might be able to start doing little bits of things that used to be your favorite things that you're not really bothered about anymore because you've lost interest in doing anything, but you might be able to do a little bit of something you used to like. You might start to notice something good. You might see a pretty flower or some sort of little sign that maybe your mood's starting to lift. And one of the best lessons I learned about it was when I was in a coffee shop in Manchester, looking out of the window with a friend, and I saw a woman being horrible to her baby, swearing and shouting. I don't know, a toddler rather, who'd done something it shouldn't have, and it was really distressing. And I said, "Oh, look at that awful woman, isn't life horrible? Look, mothers are horrible. Oh God, isn't it awful?" And he said, "Well, hang on a minute, look to the other side of the road." And on the other side of a road was a woman cuddling her baby and smiling and cooing and encouraging and talking to it kindly. So that's a little story I often tell people. There is goodness there. You just can't see it yet, but you will. And the other thing I'll trot out, because it's important, is if it's really bad and you've reached the point where you think, well, the best thing is just to end it all. What I would always say to somebody who's really got in that awful pit of despair and decided they can't bear their life anymore is that if you kill yourself, there is no hope. And hope is what you need right now. So hang in there and hope will come. It will improve. And it's such a joy to see people getting better, you know. When I worked with people who were depressed, I remember forcing some poor bloke to go out on the golf course because golf used to be his thing. And it was, well, what do you feel like doing? Oh, I don't feel like doing anything. Well, what's the thing you feel least like not doing? Well, I suppose I could drag myself around the golf course, but I don't really want to see anybody because I'll be really embarrassed. And I said, well, no, they'll just talk about golf, won't they? So off he went. And yes, it worked, the fresh air and the walking about and the physically walking around as if he was happy. You can actually kid the neurons in your depressed brain to work for you. So actually, if you kind of smile and make yourself go through the motions, it can actually help a bit in getting out there and doing things instead of sitting at home on your own. Worst thing is to sit at home on your own.
Absolutely. Is poetry a way for you to give unrepresented voices a voice?
Oh God, yes, absolutely. Oh, I'm going to look at my little book now and see who's in here. Yes, people I've worked with who were abused. Definitely. Yes, people who've suffered awful childhoods. People who've lived with psychosis. Who have we got here? When we write together, that was working with a group of people with long-term mental illness. Art therapy, very much. Yes. Concrete Moon, definitely. Yes, going through it. I think of all sorts of people that I've known who wouldn't be out there now telling people things that had happened to them. It's yeah, there's still stigma and there's still shame and it still stops people talking. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a huge amount of empathy in your work. Is empathy important to being a poet?
Oh, what an interesting question. I thought you were going to say to being a nurse, and that of course you wouldn't say that because you'd think that was obvious, wouldn't you? But when some nurses I've worked with, it probably isn't necessarily obvious. Is empathy important to being a poet? So empathy is understanding how other people feel. Now, if we think about that from the point of view of the poet and the reader, it's incredibly important because what you're trying to do is understand the effect you're having on the reader. One of the most difficult things I've found is I always want to spell things out. I think people won't understand what I'm saying and I overdo it and I over explain. And an editor will come along and say, no, you don't need, you've already shown that. You don't need to tell us, you don't need to bang it home. So I think empathy is really important from the point of view of the craft of the poem. But you also, I suppose, have to have some idea of whether the feeling you're putting in a poem is going to be received in some kind of useful or pleasurable way by the reader. And that's quite a subtle thing. Is that something you have naturally, or is that something you learn? I don't know. So I'm going to say, yes, empathy is very important in writing. And whether it's something you can learn or not, I honestly don't know. What an interesting question. What do you think?
I think it is.
You
It
can
is
learn?
important to have some sort of insight if you're writing about someone. Poets tend to feel quite deeply. What they're
Yes.
feeling deeply, I don't know. Probably lots of different
Mm,
things. But yeah, I mean, I mean, when I read your poems, I just thought that is such gentle care of that person if they are a real person.
mm.
And it was just like you wrapped your arms around them. You just
Oh,
kind of took
oh,
the poem just kind of took that person person's shape, you know. So yeah, I found yours very empathetic. I find that the poetry that I like is very considerate of people and tries to represent a situation without taking a side.
Yes, 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 that's a good point. I suppose, yeah, I mean, Robert Frost said, no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader. So I guess when I've tapped into my deepest emotions is maybe when my poems come out well. And I learned quite early on when I was writing that the more I gave of myself in the poems, the more the reader related to it. So I thought, you know, I'm this mad person. I've got all these conditions. I've got complex PTSD, and I've got lupus, and I've got Sjogren's, and I've got bipolar, and who's going to want to read this mad woman stuff? But everybody associates with the emotion, and I found the more I gave away, the more people connected with it. There's a beautiful quote which I'm going to completely mess up, from The History Boys by Alan Bennett, where somebody says, it's something like, I wish I had it written down to read you, but something like, it's as if a hand reached out from the page and took yours. Yeah. And that really stuck with me right at the beginning. And I found if I did just split myself apart and let it all spill out, that people would relate to that emotion, whatever it was I was talking about. So maybe there's an empathy there, a natural empathy, and that people, we're all relating to those emotions together.
Yeah.
Maybe.
When
Yeah.
you said well, who would want to listen to this mad woman's writing? I find that maybe sometimes I feel like is everyone mad? It seems like everyone I encounter on a daily basis, it is mad, and it leaves me feeling quite shocked. Like, what was that interaction? What just happened? Is everyone mad? And actually, I find speaking to you, someone that will say, you know, hello, I'm mad, is actually a lot more pleasant and forthright and just nice and just so enjoyable than if I just go and have a chat with my neighbor and I'll just think, actually, that person's quite scary. I think I'll keep away from them, you know.
Well, we're all a big mishmash of our genetic makeup and the experiences that we've had. And our genetic makeup will maybe influence the way we react to those experiences. Some people will bounce back more easily than others, maybe. But the only way to really understand each other is to hear each other's stories. So with everybody, whether considered mad or not mad, you don't want to be thinking, why is that person being so weird? Why is that person behaving like that? You want to be thinking, what's happened to that person? Yeah, what's made them say that today to me at that point? What's that about? And I suppose that appeals to me because I'm a deeply analytical person who overanalyzes everything. I think most poets probably are. But it's detective work, isn't it? And it's interesting. Oh God, I sound like a vulture now.
No, I can relate
Detecting
to that
people.
absolutely. Yeah, it is interesting. And one of my favorite poems by you is your poem about Dolly the sheep. What inspired that, and what was the process of writing it like?
Oh, Dolly the sheep. Oh, I love Dolly the sheep. Well, I saw Dolly the sheep stuffed, of course, in Edinburgh Museum, just as the poem says. And I thought, oh my God, what on earth would that be like for you to see? There I am empathizing, I suppose, with a dead sheep. How about that? That's empathy for you. But thinking, yeah, what would that be like if you were exactly the same as somebody else? Could you handle that? So maybe like many of my poems, it's silly and it's humorous, but there's this grain of sadness inside. What would that be like? I will never be me, she says. And no, she won't. And it's shocking and it's wrong. And it goes completely against, when you think about it, everything I was just saying to you. What's your story? What's happened to you? Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I write poetry as a way to bring sound to the silence of abuse,
Hmm.
and I'm guessing that's what you do as well. Is that right?
I wanted to say yes, but I didn't want to say yes immediately. I wanted to just think a little bit about that. But yes, hugely. I mean, when you think about it, one of the poems in Beautiful Nowhere is written by the women who were sold and bought and sold um, on, God, what's the island called? Help, help. It's in the notes. Norfolk Island, women that were transported for things like stealing a loaf of bread. You know, they'd be transported if they were lucky. If they weren't lucky, they'd be hanged. But then the women were treated as nothing, treated as things to buy and sell. And I guess reading that, my husband's Australian, so he's very interested in history generally and in Australian history, and reading that. My husband was at great pains to protect me from the detail of what happened to the people on Norfolk Island and just let me read that little bit, bless him, because he knows I get upset with things and they get stuck in my head. But I felt I related to those women on the level of being treated as if I was worth nothing, the level of just being there for somebody else. And of course, my mother, bless her, believed that everybody was there for her. She has a narcissistic personality disorder, which is untreatable by nature of its very essence, which is that I am perfect and there is nothing wrong with me. And there's a great lesson there that the only way you can get better is to know that there's something wrong, something that needs addressing. So I had to give up and give up on that relationship because it was never going to improve. But it had a huge impact on my childhood and on my entire life. And I felt it was the essence of that was reflected in the treatment of the women on Norfolk Island, that they're nothing, you know, they're there for the men.
Yeah,
Yeah,
narcissistic personality disorder is extraordinary, isn't it? And when I say extraordinary, I just mean absolutely awful. And like you
yeah,
say, there is no way to fix. Sadly, unfortunately, there's no way
no,
to fix it. It
no.
is probably maybe the only unfixable thing, because
Mm.
even if that person was to go to therapy, they would say, "Hello, I'm perfect. Everyone around me is the issue."
Yes, exactly that.
Yeah,
Exactly that.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so yeah. What's next for you in terms of writing?
Oh,
If you have an idea of that.
well, I have written a rather ridiculous satirical pamphlet, because I always wanted to write something that really was just funny. Of course, it's ended up being full of meaning because I can't help myself. But anyway, based on my religious upbringing, which was broadly Christian, but in specific Plymouth Brethren. So more weirdness. So that's floating around. I'm still tinkering with that and maybe submit it at some point. Apart from that, I've just completely stopped writing because I'm empty. And as we were saying, I have learned not to panic and think that's it, I'll never write again. I'm still doing poetry workshops with the poetry school, and they're wonderful. And yet I'm sitting there thinking, oh, I'm not writing at the moment, you know, but I'm collecting things and I'm collecting ideas. And I know one day it will all come flying out again. Yeah.
Could you read one or two more poems, if that's all right?
Mm. How about I read a sad one and a happy one?
Yeah.
Let me see. Oh, it's interesting. Do you know, I've got my reading copy where I've got notes on it, and it says about this probably doesn't work out of context, but we've given it some context. We were talking about that narcissistic mother. So here we are, the red box. I keep thinking of the antique china doll she handed down to me when I was 10. Look, she said, when I was your age, I gave her your name. And there, embroidered on its plain blue cotton dress, my name in yellow thread. I emptied out my big red sewing box to put my fragile doll in, keep it safe. When I had children of my own, she brought that box to my house, left it like a foundling outside my front door. It felt as if there was a stone inside my throat as I opened the lid, but nestling in the padded satin red was nothing. See, once I start, I don't want to stop. I'm just going to read this. I said I was going to read 2, but I'm going to sneak this one in. I love horror films, or when I say horror, not the gore and guts, the ghosty ones, the spooky
Oh, I
ones. So
can't watch
spooky
them.
horror.
Oh.
Can't you?
No,
Oh well, this.
I end up thinking they're real. But
Oh
my husband
right.
can watch them. I said that must mean that he's sane because he can tell the difference between reality and fiction, but I can't. I'll think
No,
it's real.
no, it means you're beautifully empathic and sensitive.
Oh, thanks.
It means you're a jolly good egg. Uh, but this one, the temptation to explain it. No, it's called Forever. At night, in your frilled white gown, you hold your candelabra high. Pipes clank rattle, tarnished taps gush blood. Flies buzz or upside down crust windowsills. From the attic, a silent scream, rumble of empty rocking chair on worn wood boards. Downstairs, faintly, a piano. When the morning sun sings through stone window frames, even after toast, fresh tea, and kedgeree, you shudder at shrieks from your cellar. Some things remain there, tethered. And the reason I chose that, of course, that was first published by Kate Garrett. And she said, oh, it's PTSD. And of course it is PTSD. And I didn't want to just leave what I'd said about depression, saying, oh, it'll all be lovely and it'll be fine. Because of course that people's experience is not that everything is absolutely wonderful again, but that they're coping with things, and some things do stay.
Yes,
And
I got that. Sorry to
yeah.
interrupt you. I got that impression from your book very clearly, and I thought it was represented really, really well. The end section wasn't, and everything went back to normal, and we lived happily ever after. It was, something's different, and I'm learning to live with this difference, sort of thing.
Yes. I'm going to tell you about the Chloe life now, before I read the last poem. I had a lovely friend who was a very senior nurse, a very important person, a very well-known person, and I'll tell you the story, and I can't tell you who it is because of the story, but this person was married with children, grown-up children, and her husband was addicted to cottaging and was out having sex with boys in the toilets in the park, and the whole family was terrified that he would be caught, and he couldn't stop. And it was a big worry for them. He was at one point arrested, and he was a very high up, well-known person in psychiatry. So it was awful for everybody for all sorts of reasons. But what she used to say to her girls was, at least we don't have the Chloe life. And the Chloe life was a friend of theirs who was a nurse, who'd grown up in a nice family in a nice house with a mum and dad and 2 children. And she'd done well at school, and she'd got married to a nice doctor and had a nice life. And Every few months they had one of the rooms in the house decorated, and each year they went on a nice holiday to a nice place, and the same place every year, and they had nice children and everything was lovely. And she always they used to say, at least we haven't got a Chloe life. And I thought of the Chloe life as an absence of emotion, an absence of experience, an absence of really fully knowing what it is to be human and what it is to be alive. And I wrote, not pastel people. Last night, we'd not kept the bag packed at the back of the wardrobe, not hidden in cupboards, listening, wide-eyed, not listening, considered the bed size for cardboard, searched helplines, hovered outside the police station door, walked on, walked back. I wake thinking life will be pink sugar mice, primrose soft velvet and candy floss blue. Air will slip warm with the gentlest of breeze. But if you lobbed a ball at me now, it would not bounce, only thud, tepid, dead. The air is, I am. I look to the shape of my scars. The sting of the red revives me. I stand with my rickety spine and yell like the gold in the cracks of a kintsugi vase. I'm alive, alive, alive.
What a wonderful poem, and I love the way that you read that as well.
Thank
Where
you.
can people find more of your work online if they want to? Or
Online. Yes, good point. Well, I've got a website, which is www.louisacampbell.net. You have to remember the in Louisa, so it's louisacampbell.net. And on there, there's a page that I think it says poems and stories. So if you click on that, you can find some more work online. And there's also a tab called books, of course, if people want to buy Beautiful Nowhere, and you can get it anywhere you like. So that's great. You can get it from the publisher. I think most poets buy from the publisher, don't they? But you can get it from Waterstones, or you can get it from bookshop.org or from the wonderful Poetry Pharmacy. Yeah, but online, I try and update that. I think I've got everything on there that's currently online. There's quite a few bits in print magazines as well. But yeah, yes, website's probably the easiest place.
yeah, and finally, before I say goodbye to you, I just want to ask you a quick question because it just popped into my head just now. Do you think it makes a difference? Do you think success makes up for the bad stuff? Because you've done lots, you've won prizes, you've had books published. It's going brilliantly. It's a brilliant career. Same for me, if I may say so. But does it make up? I wouldn't have written 2 books and won prizes and performed all over the country and done whatever, but I'd have a dad or something,
Yeah.
something like that. So
Oh
does
God.
it make up?
Yes, you've made me tingle again. I honestly do believe the Chloe life stuff. What I was saying, I really do. And when it really came home to me was when I had cancer. I had throat cancer, which was treated successfully last year. And when I was first diagnosed, I thought I had the smoking one, and I didn't. I had HPV cancer, which is much, much easier to treat. But if it was the smoking one that I'd had, because I had smoked for many, many, many years, roll-ups, of course, I was a goner. I really didn't have very long to live at all. And that's what I thought before they discovered the P16, HPV, SCC, etc. And it came to me that if I was going to die, that I had experienced what it was like to be human. I'd really lived. I'd really known the highs and known the lows. So for me, even if I hadn't translated into poetry, that experience of thinking I didn't have long to live made the bad stuff worthwhile, I suppose. Is that the right thing to say? And the other thing I'd like to say, if you think of being published and having a lovely book in a bookshop, I mean, it's fantastic, it's great, and it's validating and all that, and it's wonderful. But I'm really not making this up when I say what is really wonderful is when somebody contacts you and says, I felt like that when I was depressed, you know, that poem you wrote, that's just how I felt, or I've struggled with dissociation and I totally understand what you said about so-and-so. And in fact, somebody recently who's completely retreated from social media because it was all too much for them recently contacted me out of the blue. I hadn't heard from them for years and said, I bought your book and it's really helping because I don't feel alone. And that, yeah, for me, that honestly is, it sounds so righteous and preachy, and I hate
I wonder if
sounding
you get
righteous
that a
and
lot,
preachy,
because
but
actually that's what I would say about it as well. So I
yes.
wondered you get that a lot, yeah.
Oh, that's lovely
Yeah.
that you would say that. So for me, it's about life being, you know, something that you dive into, and good stuff happens and bad stuff happens. Some people say to me when they're writing reviews, is it all right to mention your traumatic childhood? Is it all right to say this? Is it all right to say that? And I always say, well, yes, it's not my shame. You know, I don't feel ashamed of it. I'm happy for everybody to know what happened to me, because I feel, okay, I've made awful mistakes and done ridiculous things. And some of that's in the book. My experience of motherhood and how it's affected my children has been appalling in some situations. But I've completely lost my train of thought, Seti. What was I wittering on about? Yes, it's life, isn't it? Experiencing the highs and lows and things, new challenges all the time.
I find the lows similar to what you said about life experience. The lows make me love life, because you know, you wake up in the morning and you think, oh, it's what an amazingly beautiful day. I'm not psychotic and I'm not manically depressed. How gorgeous. It's gorgeous to have a cup of tea. It's gorgeous to take the colours on. It's gorgeous to get dressed. I love life. You know?
Yes. And do you notice when you're noticing good things? So you notice yourself noticing something, you know, you're like,
yeah,
you said,
absolutely. I find I'm generally quite positive. It's just that I'm depressed. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah,
it does.
yeah. Oh, it's been really wonderful talking to you, Louisa. And thank you so much. And yeah, it's been lovely to have you.
I've really enjoyed talking to you, and you've said such lovely things to me.